Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about different eating disorders and what we can do to help those who experience them. So, this past year, I've taken a special interest in learning about different mental illnesses. And I honestly didn't know a lot about eating disorders, but I was excited to get to read the book Elena Vanishing by Elena and Claire Dunkel. And I really enjoyed learning from Elena's experiences and hope. And today, I'd really love to be able to share a few of those insights with you. So first I wanted to talk just a little bit about anorexia over the years. So it's something that's been a topic of conversation since biblical times with fasting. It was thought that if you fasted longer, that you were more pure, and so people kind of developed issues that way. Later they were considered to be witches. It was referred to as wasting disease, and it wasn't until 1873 that anorexia started to turn from spiritual perfection to focusing more on like bodily image. And then it wasn't even until 1980 that it was technically recognized as an eating disorder in the DSM-3. And since then, college counseling centers have expanded to include services, and now there are more and more treatments that are available. So the main thing to notice here is that there is progress, slowly, that it's becoming more recognized, and also to imagine the oppression that people have experienced through these years when it was not recognized. And even now, is there still a negative stigma against seeking treatment and against having mental illness or specifically eating disorders. From this, you can see through the years in the US that eating disorders went from little or no recognition to now finding viable treatment options. At least 30 million people from all ages and all genders suffer from an eating disorder in the United States. So studies show that even though stereotypes argue that it's young white females who struggle with eating disorders, it actually spreads far beyond a specific socioeconomic status, age, or race. People often also believe that all purge, and this is false. Some exercise or use calorie count. There's also such a variety of eating disorders, such as binging. One especially detrimental stereotype people often have is that eating disorders are a choice. And again, this is completely false. So a large reason why these stereotypes are such a big deal is that they're really negative because they're leading to a smaller percentage reaching out for help when they need it. So an example is the common belief that it's women who usually struggle with eating disorders. This discourages men from seeking help because they feel ostracized in that situation. And there's also the belief that somebody has to be skinny or depressed or shy or have anxiety, and this leads to a lack of proper identification of those who suffer and makes it so it's more difficult for us to recognize our friends or family who may be struggling. And so it's really important that we're focusing on the people that we know and love instead of looking for these stereotypes. Next, I'll focus specifically on oppression coming from different types of legal issues, politics, and economics. So one of the big issues was that it wasn't recognized until DSM-3 and 4, which means that before then it was harder to get funding for studies to find treatment, and it wasn't as common to be able to get adequate treatment as well. And next, insurance policies are a really big problem when trying to find treatment. In the book I discussed earlier, Elena Vanishing, she talked about how she couldn't get the correct type of feeding tube that she needed because of her insurance policy, and she also talked about another young woman getting kicked out of a facility because her time was over. And along with insurance policies, funding is a struggle because it's expensive to be able to get adequate treatment and oftentimes medication. And so this kind of creates a divide between those who can afford the correct kind of help and those who cannot. Next, for coping and resilience, those who do seek treatment often learn fantastic techniques through therapy that honestly could be useful for anyone, no matter what it is that you're struggling with. We learn techniques about, adjusting self-image, expectations, self-love, and even understanding self-importance. Another thing I found through my research is that people who have struggled with different types of mental illnesses and eating disorders, once they've overcome them, they are often open and seek to help others in recovery because they have now experienced it. I thought that was really powerful. Another coping and resilience thing I noticed is that in a lot of times with group therapy, people rely very heavily on one another, and they're very transparent and authentic with those around them. Now that we've discussed some of the history and the oppression of the group, I want to focus specifically in schools. And so bullying is apparent in any school for a variety of reasons. But a student's weight is often a target for bullying, whether they're saying someone is too skinny or too fat or too tall or too short. But a lot of this treatment causes people to begin thinking about eating disorders. It also causes a disconnect between peers and makes people feel inferior or anxious when they recognize that they do need help. And so again, it's that negative stigma towards seeking help also has a really severe impact. Another problem is there's this pressure for success that many students feel. They feel that they need perfect grades, they need to have the perfect job, and with that often comes like the feeling for a need of a perfect self-image to match. And so media and social pressures have created like that there's this idea that there's a correct way that somebody should look and somebody should act. And so these pressures often cause people to turn to different mental illnesses, or they cause them to be more susceptible to having mental illnesses. And again, this leads to the oppression of the group because it causes people to turn away from seeking treatment, and it minimalizes the issue and makes people feel that what they're experiencing isn't valid. So through time, there has been more policies that have made changes to make it so this group is less targeted. Previously, there were issues with people marketing these dieting pills and things that were not safe or healthy. There's also other misleading or damaging treatments that existed. And there are policies against that now, and there's also better insurance policies that allow people to be able to get counseling or go to rehabilitation centers. And additionally, counseling is more readily available in various school situations, whether that be high school or college as well. As far as schools being able to help, first it's important to teach awareness and to be able to help students recognize the signs of eating disorders so that they can see when someone they know is struggling. And the same goes for teachers as well, to be able to identify that. It's also important to teach people that it's okay to get help. We need to make students aware of options, of how they can get it, and help them realize that there's honestly nothing wrong with reaching out. And finally, we need to be able to teach acceptance and help people to focus on anti-bullying programs and to help and support one another. Some of the main ideas that I've learned through this project and through this class is one, focusing on the single story, that we need to overcome the stereotypes that are given to people, that are given for people. And especially with eating disorders, we need to be able to recognize the true symptoms that are out there. A lot of times also, like with the single story, I'd often thought of it as being projected to others, but as I studied, I found that another big thing is a lot of times we project one for ourselves as well. And so I especially learned this through the book, Lena Vanishing, that she had this single story idea of who she had to be. And she restricted herself to that idea and wasn't open to the possibilities of growing and changing. And so I think it's important that we're careful to not allow our own biases to restrict others or ourselves by believing in a single story. Another thing I love that we talked about is how we need to cool down the temperature with so many different topics. And again, it's the same way with different mental illnesses, that we need to avoid the negative stigma that accompanies the idea of treatment, and that we need to focus on the people that are behind the issues, instead of getting so overwhelmed and a little bit hot-headed about the different topics. And finally, I love how we talked about empathy. I feel like it brings those 2 points together. The empathy is key because we have to be aware of the struggles that others are facing to be able to assist them. And oftentimes the best way for us to help our family, our friends, and our future students is to do our best to understand them and comfort them in their difficult times. Overall, I've been really grateful for this project and for the opportunity it gave me to understand another oppressed group. And honestly, it kind of opened my eyes to an understanding of different types of oppression that everyone goes through, and just the fact of how important it is to be aware of those around us in our classrooms with our future students and with their parents as well. And I know that as we recognize and work to overcome our own biases, that we will be prepared to help others as they're learning as well. And finally, I've attached just a little bit of my final project here. It's a song, a mashup of a few different things that are about feelings with how we look. And with that, I have some statistics about anorexia and eating disorders that I want to share.
You are beautiful in every single way. Words won't bring you down, so don't let them bring you down today. Why should you care what they think of you when you're all alone by yourself? Do you like you? 'Cause I like you.